Bum bum ba-dum bum. Dum 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 dum. Dum 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 dum. Well, hello, whoever, wherever, whenever you are. Hope you had a fine Thanksgiving day. Enjoyed turkey and gravy and all the trimmings. I had a pretty good Thanksgiving day, although it was a bit chaotic because we had planned our little community dinner that everyone cooked something different. I was responsible for an apple pie. And it seems like things just went wrong on all sides. One person who probably should have realized, I think he wasn't really thinking about what was going on, because this one neighbor, his wife just went permanently into the nursing home, and she's been back and forth between the hospital and the house quite a few times. She's had strokes and is immobilized, and then her husband had surgery and can't lift anymore to help her in and out of bed, and so finally they just had to recognize that she needs full hospital staff. So she moved back to the nursing home, this time permanently, and so the whole family gathered there, and so that part of the Thanksgiving dinner went. Then the other person, one of the other people that was key to this, was the cook. We all should have thought of this, and I don't know why I didn't speak up and say, you sure you're going to have the day off? Because he never has Thanksgiving off. He knows that. He's worked at that place for years. But for some reason, he thought he was going to have Thanksgiving off, and so we planned this whole thing. Then it turned out, no, they needed him there. And it's a local restaurant that's not a chain. It's family owned, and the whole community really loves that place. And they provide, like, you can order the full Thanksgiving dinner done up, like the whole turkey and everything, and pick up the box and bring it back to your house and set up for the whole family with, looks like you cooked it all at home. And they do a few hundred of those every year. And so they have these people in cars all lined up to pick up their homebound Thanksgiving dinners, and then you've got the others that are there to eat, sit down and eat in the restaurant. So by the time that poor guy got out, last thing he wanted to do was sit down to a turkey dinner here. In fact, he seemed to have thrown his back out or something, so we just said, hey, go take a nap. We'll do okay. So a couple other neighbors and I went ahead and ate what we had ready. And, well, pretty good, turkey, sweet potatoes, cranberry sauce. The cook had provided stuffing from the restaurant, as well as a few other things. Stuffing was not very good. I won't say anything, though. There's probably some kind of recipe they have. But anyway, it was still a good dinner. I myself had decided, when we realized things were going to go a little bit crazy and chaotic, I decided, well, I'll just cook a bunch of stuff today instead of yesterday, because I really don't have the storage in my small refrigerator to keep everything cooked ahead. So I spent the day realizing that although I have just finished refurnishing, or just really redesigning my kitchen, it's got all new equipment for it, it's still a tiny kitchen. And it's not designed to cook 3 or 4 things at once. So I had fun turning my whole place into a kind of a Chinese jigsaw puzzle. And we got through the day. And then finally sat down. And after it's over, I come back home and I'm sewing and watching these videos. And I'm wondering how many more Thanksgivings we've got before our civilization is completely gone. I mean, I'm not really thinking about politics and stuff anymore because it looks to me like that's the least of our worries. The political parties and the various things that people yell back and forth at each other and try to pass a new law against this, or why aren't we enforcing that law against that? But I've been noticing more and more and more of the content is AI designed. An example, okay, there's this one thing that was supposed to be a nature thing about Yemen. That's what. Then I looked at the thumbnail and I said, those houses really can't be built that way. But in the olden days, they did build these castles right up to cliff faces. And I know they really did because in 1975, I traveled in France a little bit. And I actually saw a village that had the side of the old church and everything that go back to the Middle Ages really did turn into the cliff below. And so, it was really built. They really did build that way. So I'm looking at the thumbnail of this video, and it's got this whole closely packed city of what look like ancient, 700-year-old buildings built with a cliff on a long, narrow cliff ridge. And, yeah, they did, because they had wars, they had warlords and stuff. They had to... So I'm thinking, well, maybe that's real. That is what it's supposed to be. But then watching the video, the narration is a realistic sounding voice. But then AI does these things that it's not just that we're being robbed of quality human produced content. That's part of the problem. The real problem is, what is this doing to people's minds? Because young people, children, are growing up listening to this stuff. And we are formed by what we take in intellectually. People my age were formed by taking in a very similar set of books and stories, nursery rhymes, fairy tales, fairly common histories. And yeah, as adults, people argue and say, oh, that Columbus really didn't do what we say he did, and this one didn't do that, and blah, blah, blah. And, you can argue about it. But the basic structure of thinking is not just the content. And we had well-written, grammatically sensible content. So I decided to go ahead and watch this video that's supposed to be about Yemen. And it shows some beautiful scenes, and it shows these trees that look like umbrellas. Possibly just the natural growth, but also if they have animals there that, if you're in an area where there are a lot of deer, for example, they will eat all the leaves, so that the trees will have a flat-looking bottom if they're enclosed in that area and they don't wander much. And so maybe there are places in Africa where the giraffes and the other animals, I'm just looking at it thinking, maybe those trees really just grow that way, or maybe there's some kind of animal foraging behavior that keeps the bottoms perfectly flat. And they look like umbrellas. So the AI says these trees look like umbrellas snatched from the sky. And then it goes on. And I'm thinking about that. Umbrellas snatched from the sky. You think about an umbrella and you think sky, I guess, if you're thinking about rain, to make a metaphor. But an umbrella snatched from the sky is pure nonsense. And all of these AIs do that. If you listen to them too closely, you pick that up and you go, this is just, it's just nonsense. It's word salad. And I think we're in for a very strange civilizational collapse, because it's not just going to be a matter of our structural problems. And there are problems. I mean, cities where the local governments are no longer keeping the repairs to the sewage systems and the buildings, where, you know, construction codes are based more on who can pay a bribe than on actual structural permits that make sense. You know, the cities are beginning to fall apart. I saw a video recently. There are some neighborhoods in New York where the old brick buildings that go back to the 1800s and should be in good condition, the ones that are kept up with good maintenance, but they're not maintaining them anymore, and they're beginning to become, some of them are beginning to become dangerous. So you're seeing this collapsing structure, but at the same time, what's going on with our mentality, with our minds, being fed nonsense that's very subtle, but it adds up. If all the videos are being produced by AI, number one, AI can't pick up the fact that saying an umbrella is snatched from the sky, in human terms, it's surreal. And surrealism is not good for children. It's not good for forming a mind. It's good for creative play when you're already a mature adult, because you understand that it is creative play. That's what makes it funny and interesting. But when you feed surrealism to younger people who have no structure against which to measure it, they can't form, it wrecks the thought process. So we're facing a collapse of our ability to think. Not just a collapse of a common mythology. You know, we have our common history and people argue against it, like I mentioned Columbus as an example. You can argue about that, but you're still arguing in logical language. You still have logical language. But this is much worse than just changing the storyline of what history is. This is erasing the possibility of actually having a storyline of any kind. And it scares me because it's happening very rapidly. I mean, AI video production, I think it's less than a year since we started seeing seeing it as a common thing, and it's already pretty much wrecked the media. I mean, the only way you know you're getting human contact is it really the amateur videos like mine where nothing fancy is going on. And in the craft videos, it's getting to the point where you have to be pretty sure you're watching the person do something, because they've got video AI-produced videos that are presenting things like knitting and crocheting patterns and similar, you know, just pattern ideas, that when people try to actually reproduce them, they don't add up. They're just thrown together with no real structure. And I've noticed it in the cooking videos. If you look at a couple of cooking videos in a row, like you're looking for the same recipe, so you look at 3 or 4 of the same food, I've noticed that in some cases you'll suddenly get a string of these videos that all have similar dishes that they're doing, but some of the ingredients begin to look really, really weird. And I begin to question how many of them are actually AI fiction. I was looking at these fancy rolled meat dishes where, the meat is rolled around some stuffing, and sometimes pastry is put over it, like in the beef Wellington, and other times there are meatloafs where they put the bacon around it and stuff. And a bunch of them had puff pastry. And all of a sudden, I saw all these puff pastry dishes being presented, some with meat, some main dishes, and some desserts. They all had similar-looking avatars. Young women, women apparently in their 20s or 30s. And it looked like German or Germanic language channel names. And they were the kind that show just the hands, and they show the steps of making. And some of them, the steps didn't even flow through correctly. You look at it and say, wait a minute, there's something missing here. And so those are the ones where I started to notice that some of the ingredients seemed really odd. And I think that while some of the videos might be a genuine recipe that they used AI to put the graphics together, I think a few of them, particularly in that series of weirdly similar profiles, these are all different channels, they all started coming up together. And like I say, there's an awful lot of Germanic sounding channel names with very similar looking women in the avatars, which makes me suspect AI. And, okay, I'm an experienced cook, so I can notice that there's something off about that. But people are reliant on craft videos to learn things because they're not learning them in school. They're not learning them at home. It's really, and so now it's just like intellectual poison out there. Very depressing to think about what lies in wait for us. That's why I say I wonder if this isn't maybe our last Thanksgiving. I doubt we have more than a few, maybe 2 or 3 more if we're lucky. And, well, who knows what the future holds. Sorry to be so depressing, but didn't mean to be. I did enjoy the day, as chaotic as it was. Ended up with a good turkey dinner and apple pie, and my neighbor made it through his crazy work day. And the other one did get to spend more time with family and let them handle the meal while he dealt with it. It's difficult when people have to make that decision to go into the nursing home permanently. It's not easy, especially independent people. And that's another thing. Oh boy, here comes another depressing thought. Right now, the nursing homes are still there with fairly competent human staff. But as the years go on and the numbers of elderly percentage compared to younger people, and the tendency of these, I think the medical field is one of the places that's really adopting AI a lot there and putting AI into monitor situations where instead of having a human nurse's aide go into the room and check on a person periodically. They're putting screens up that interact with, chatbot type things. And that makes a lot of sense at first, because at first these AI companion type programs are working off human training. But one of the things that's happening very, very rapidly is as the training base of material is produced by other AIs, so it goes generationally, the quality deteriorates. And if you add in the fact that somebody in a nursing home condition, they have a lot of interference with their ability to communicate, if they've had strokes and can't really speak, if their intellectual thinking is confused, and there can be drug side effects that can cause hallucination. It's scary to think about the quality of care. Even with the best of intentions, it's not going to remain very high. So, I don't know. I mean, what do we do about it? You can't just stop progress. I was also looking at videos about all these giant data centers that run the server farms that power the AIs. And that's scary. They're having issues in neighborhoods where they've built these things. They look like it's just a big warehouse full of computers, so what harm can it do to a neighborhood? But apparently all of the fans and air conditioning equipment and everything that have to be in place to keep the thing running are producing these low-level vibrations and just low-level hums that can be heard for miles. So all of the residential areas around these giant server farms are subjecting people to a very subtle deterioration in their quality of life. And some are beginning to speak up and fight back. And you think, well, this is something the corporations that are building these things probably never really occurred to them that this was going to be a problem, because the decibel level is not very high. It's not loud noises. And so if they thought they were coming in under the decibel level, they probably didn't think about that continuous low hum. And they say even when they're able to dampen it, there's one family that was interviewed that said they started using noise-canceling headphones so they could sleep. But they could still feel vibration. If they touched the wall, they could feel the wall vibrating. That's a scary thought. And then, of course, these things are really using up a lot of water and other resources. They figure each one represents about 200, something like 200 small cities worth of household energy use. And you have to wonder, what's the point of it all? Because all of the data that they're handling is becoming more and more corrupted, in the computer sense of corrupted. You know, like a corrupted file that just, it started out as a picture or a film, but it ends up unable to play because the pixels and everything are just a mess. And this is what's happening. So they're building all these giant server farm data centers, but 5 years from now, how many of them are actually going to be functioning at the level for which they were built? Not to mention the pressure that's being put on the rest of our structure, but with the water demands and the energy demands. There are places where they've called a moratorium on decommissioning things like coal-fired electric generating plants because they've got these corporations putting up databases for the AIs, and they need too much electricity, so they can't rely on, whatever ecology they were putting in place. And a lot of them are being built in desert areas because, and this is where we're losing our ability to self-govern, because in the past, the governing body of a desert city or county would look at, this is the water resources we have, you want to come in and build this big thing, it's not doable. You can't do it that way. But because they're more concerned with appearances and propaganda and looking good on paper, they go and they chase after these big business corporate things to come in and build. And they offer them tax rebates and tax credits, and don't worry about the water, and they plow up the farmland. There's places where the farmers are beginning to get concerned that the AI server farm is cutting into the irrigation water in some of these desert states. Irrigation is a touchy issue. It's the oldest form of human government programming, has always been water. All the ancient civilizations were built on what you might call water empires. The central government controlled the water. That's how a lot of these desert monoliths and, it's just crazy. It's crazy that we're doing this. So I don't think the political arguments that are going on, and people are identity-based arguments, do you believe this, do you believe that? That's just the surface of a much deeper problem. And it's not a problem we can really tackle. We can't just stop the development of all this tech. It's out of control. And when you look at the people in charge, the corporate executives, at least the ones that are highly visible, they're all nuts. I mean, look at Jeff Bezos. How many millions of dollars did he put into building a joke of a rocket to send bimbos in orbit so that he could stick the middle finger to Elon Musk? Look at Bill Gates, a comic book villain, buying up farmland, and that's part of this whole thing with the AI stuff. Farms need water. Bill Gates is trying to get people to accept the idea that we need to depopulate, meaning we need to accept the corporate genocide machine that's being set up right now, and I do believe it is. And I believe Bill Gates is one of the central figures in pushing an incoming general genocide, not going to be limited to any particular ethnic or religious group. That other guy there, the one that thinks he's the Antichrist, wants to be immortal. Sam Altman, the guy that invented ChatGPT, which is obviously, it's no accident that particular chat thing that became so much popular so much earlier than the others appears to be feeding into self-destructive psychosis with the people who use it too frequently, who begin to get hooked into a false relationship with the thing. To me, it's mind-boggling to think it's just a coincidence that that company has a CEO who's running around talking about the Antichrist and talking about himself. And he was in an interview with Ron Douthat. I might be saying his name wrong. Douthat. I want to pronounce it do that, but everyone else that I hear speak of him saying Douthat. Anyway, he has an interview with Sam Altman that's been pretty viral. You've probably seen it, where Altman is talking about the Antichrist and begins to indicate things about himself. That's one of the people with all the power to do this stuff to us. That's another form of insanity. I like to think that Elon Musk is not insane, because Elon Musk frequently does say things that indicate a healthy awareness of what's going on. And he's certainly much more effective in terms of the kinds of companies he's built and what they do. He's much more real world. He's not living completely on a data farm with nothing but programming code in his mind. His companies are doing concrete things. But you have to wonder about that too, because at his level, the only people he really has equal type of social interaction with are people like Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, and Sam Altman. Those they're like, I mean, you cannot be part of an insane group of people and remain sane yourself. And I really don't want to go into some of my fears about Elon Musk, because maybe it's just me thinking some of these things, and I don't want to feed the algorithm. That's another thing. The algorithm picks up ideas from what people are talking about, and it collectivizes them and remixes them and feeds them up to other people. And so you, as a human being, or any of us as a human being, we might feel that, well, we're talking about this very sensitive subject in a context where it's safe to consider it. But the algorithm takes it and serves it up to some nutcases who want to take the subject in a different direction. And it's kind of, what do you call it, when something is it's infusing energy and escalating, adding momentum to the normal social process in which somebody has an idea that might be a good idea or neutral, but it gets picked up and turned into something very evil as other people learn about it. Well, in the past, that hasn't really been a very rapid process, and it's involved only people, like, well, with the atom bomb, for example. You could have nuclear power plants on the one hand, or atomic bombs on the other. Well, the class of people who could understand enough about that to talk about it and produce both things got produced. But that was a smaller group of people who needed to be part of the government and money structure to build these things. But now, with the way this crazy stuff is going on, you don't have to be a trillionaire, billionaire, powerful corporation to take an idea and run it in a very bad direction. And it runs through the population very rapidly before we can really think about it and before any controls can be put around it. So, yeah, I think things are accelerating, and I don't know, we're going to have an interesting couple of years ahead of us. I'm thankful that right now, in my own personal world, things are going well. I hope that people who are living in chaotic places and facing, I mean, right now, the weather, that's another thing. The weather up north, when they're getting these terrible blizzards, which I think is going on now, Ryan Holiall, this is the Weather Channel I watch, he was talking about it building up. We're not as easy, people aren't surviving these things as easily as we did 100, 50, 60 years ago. It's a lot harder for people to stay warm in a winter snow where they lose their power and everything. I mean, some people are put some money into having a generator and everything else that they could use to keep going, which is only a temporary fix. If it's a long-term collapse where you have a storm that comes in and collapses things, and then you don't have competent people in your local government to get systems back in together, so it ends up, the natural disaster ends up being multiplied into something worse by human incompetence. I just pray that each person out there is able, during what remains of our civilized communications, to prepare individual methods of survival. The only people you can save are yourself and those closest to you. You can't save your whole town. And if enough people pay attention and do that for themselves, then things won't be too bad. So, God bless some, have mercy on some, and to hell with the rest. That's all you can do is shrug your shoulders, because God is allowing things to go the way they go. And it's up to us to find our way through them. Denise Matteau, over and out.